much, Andrea, for being with us today. We're very excited to have you here to share your company's journey and to exchange ideas with us, helping move the conversation on barley forward. Um, so we'll start with Valley Malt's story and how you work with producers. Can you tell me a bit how did Valley Malt come about and what's your mission today?
Thank you so much for inviting me to talk about Valley Malt. Valley Malt started in 2009. My husband and I were home brewers, and we had read an article in a local newspaper about a bakery in our town that was getting farms in the area to grow grains again. Grains had been a part of the agricultural landscape of New England for many years, but because of the concentration of mills and malt houses in the Midwest, a lot of the processors that would have processed local grains that were being grown were closing. And so for about 100 years, there were no new malt houses being built or running in New England. And part of this had to do with technologies like the canals, the Erie Canal, and rail, and various ways to make it more accessible to move grain from these larger agricultural areas in the Midwest. But we read this article and we were very inspired at that time in 2009 with local food, and really believed that by supporting local farms, you're going to have a healthier diet by eating food that's fresh, but also that you're going to have a healthier community, because when you have economies that are based on keeping the money locally and not extracting, when you buy something, food that's being grown far away, in a lot of ways, your money is being extracted to other places. And so we really wanted to be a part of the next generation of business owners making food and beverages that would be able to really encourage more of a local economy. And part of that also had to do with sustainability, that we felt that things traveling, and especially in the craft beer industry, which is where we exist, a lot of that, the materials, the malt and the hops, were coming from Europe. A lot of the early craft brewers, and even still today, craft brewers are looking for European malts because they are perceived to be premium. So we read this article and we were very inspired because we had never thought about grains being part of a local food system. And so once we were inspired by that idea, we thought maybe this bakery is baking a local loaf of bread. Maybe we could make a local pint of beer. So that was our inspiration. And we thought that would be what we could bring to the table is we could start a brewery that used only local ingredients. What we found out in that process was that there were no malt houses east of the Mississippi River. And so instead of starting a brewery, we decided to start a malt house. And that was Valley Malt. And we encouraged a local vegetable farmer to grow 25 acres of spring barley. We had to find seed from North Dakota. And we grew that first 25 acres. We didn't have anywhere to store it. We actually took our vehicles out of our garage and laid down tarps and dumped all of that first malting barley into our garage. And we found old equipment to be able to clean the seed, and we built our first malt system, which was a 1-ton all-in-one unit. And we learned about malting through the internet and by also talking to experts that were willing to share information with us, that worked for various universities and some of the larger malt houses. And we also found a maltster in Quebec, in Thetford Mines, that was willing to let us come and see his craft malt house. That was Bruno Vachon. He was an early maltster in the Quebec region. And so we were very inspired. We said, if they're doing it across the border, there's no reason why we can't do it here. And so that was the beginning of our journey. And 15 years later, we are still really passionate about malting, and we have been able to source most of our, almost 100% of the grains that we process from the Northeast. There's only been a very few exceptions of things like naked oats, bringing those in from Ohio. But what we did, one of the things that we'll talk about mostly today, what we did discover was that we were better suited for winter barley in the Northeast, particularly the region where we're getting most of our malt from, which is New York, the Finger Lakes, the Hudson Valley, the Connecticut River Valley. Winter barley was a much more consistent and quality product than spring barley. And we can get into more of that later. And what we did find was that with the winter barley, we were able to, once we understood how to malt, several years in and really started to learn our craft, we started looking at how do we create some of these European malts here in the Northeast. And so with the help of the industry in finding ways to evaluate malts and do sensory, we were able to make malts that were, we were able to make almost like clones of some of the more popular European malts. So that became a focus of us as well, to try to replace the European malts that craft brewers were purchasing with local malts that were just as good quality. And in 15 years, we have done that. We have a lot of really premium malts that are making Pilsner malts and lagers, which are styles of beer where the malt has to be really excellent. And in this process, we have found a lot of consistency with winter barley. And just a little bit more about our story. In 2018, we also added a flour mill. So we stone mill flour using a lot of the same producers and using a lot of the same grains. And our flour mill is also primarily using winter wheats. And I understand that in the Quebec region, that is also becoming, other mills in Quebec are starting to use winter wheats as well. And winter wheat is slightly more hardy than winter barley. But we have found a lot of, early on in the 2010, 2011, when we were trialing different types of winter barleys, we did have some problems with winter kill, but we have found varieties that are much more resilient. And I guess just a little bit more about our story. My husband and I run the business together. We have 8 employees. We have, most of that is on the flour mill side. It's a little bit more labor intensive. Our malt side is a little bit more automated. We started off producing 1-ton batches. We now produce 9-ton batches. We produce about 600 to 800 tons of malt annually. and about that same amount of flour as well.
Wow, very inspiring, very journey, very inspiring, and it gives the taste to go taste your beer. We couldn't. We decided to not do the drive, but originally the cohort we had wanted to go physically and have the whole view. Maybe for another time. I hope so.
I hope so.
Yeah. Andrea, could you walk us through a bit how you work with producers over time, over the course of a year? Things
Mm-hmm.
like, do you plan things together? Do you share agronomy feedback or quality
Mm-hmm.
reviews and things like that?
Yeah, I'll share a little bit of how we started working together with producers and now how we work together with producers. So early on, we were the idea that we wanted producers to grow malt barley was crazy. So we had to find growers that were willing to do that. And so we attended a lot of conferences. We attended a lot of organic farming conferences and a lot of corn and soybean, any kind of conferences where farmers would be there and farmers that we thought would be interested in using malt barley as a rotation. And early on, it was very hard to communicate quality and provide feedback because we were amateurs and it wasn't, we were not established. And so it was hard for producers to trust what we were saying. But what we were able to do, and what is really important of how we succeeded, was we collaborated with the researchers who were very happy to collaborate with us. And they were able to provide the sort of more expert opinions on malt quality. So I would say that early on, we were learning about quality along with the producers. And we relied a lot on industry experts to be able to teach all of us what we needed to know about quality. One of the things that I started in 2011, was an annual event called Farmer Brewer Winter Weekend. And this event ran for about 8 years. And it was in January every year. So a time of year when a lot of people have the ability to attend a weekend long event. And the event was really focused on all of us participating in shared learning. And so we would invite the malting experts from North Dakota, Oregon State. We had Bruno from Quebec come. He came for the first 5 years, and he was an expert on malting. And researchers talking to us about, oh, you know what you all need if this is what you want to do? You need a coordinated variety trial. So this event was a catalyst. It was also an event where other people that wanted to learn how to start either growing malt barley or malting or brewing with local ingredients also came. So, and it was very fun. We had lots of beer and extravagant dinners with local ingredients. And it was a time of a lot of learning, a lot of fun, and a lot of collaboration amongst the stakeholders, the supply chain. And so I attribute having those conferences to our success.
Mm.
And so now the way that we work with producers in planning and feedback is much more casual because we've been working together. Some of the farms we've been working together now for 15 years. And we have landed on varieties that we are pretty happy with. But we also, so we're in a stable place, both in the varieties that we are growing and in the quantity that we're consuming, because craft beer it went through a very big bubble. And there was a lot of growth in craft beer. And now there's a little bit of plateauing, if not shrinking, because people are being more health conscious and not drinking as much. But what that has meant is that things have stabilized. And so we are still providing feedback. We have, this year alone, I have a new variety from Virginia Tech called Avalon. And one of our producers grew about 25 acres of that variety. And so we're able to malt that this year and consider whether or not this might be a new variety to bring to the table. So we'll take the Avalon, that'll be about 3 batches that we'll malt. We're doing a lot of micro malting of it right now so that we can understand how it behaves. And then when we go to produce a production batch of it, hopefully the quality will be good and we can have brewers experiment with it and provide us with feedback as well. So that's the kind of feedback that we're mostly talking about. Other things this year across the board, we saw a lot of high protein and thinner, like less plumpness, thinner kernels. So that's something that we're just communicating in terms of cleaning and storage. It makes more sense to potentially clean that barley on the farm and clean out some of the thinner kernels on the farm rather than transport it to us and have us doing it. So things like that right now. When we work with new growers, which we still occasionally have new growers that we work with, certainly when that happens, there's more concentration on providing feedback and more even before feedback, trying to provide information ahead of them growing it and harvesting it to make sure that they succeed. And we have created, so in 2013, I helped to found the Craft Maltsters Guild. And the Guild has been a place for education and learning. They offer malt courses, webinars, and we created a quality manual that is kind of an industry standard now so that you don't have to listen to me talk about quality. You can read this manual and also, talk to me, but we have like kind of these more educational tools that we can provide growers. And a lot of times too, when I have a new grower that's interested, I'll put them in touch with an existing grower or producer to be able to learn from them and possibly visit their farm or look at their farm's facility in terms of storage and cleaning and that sort of thing. But I would say that as far as planning goes, again, we're at a very stable place so that the amount of acres that somebody is growing is fairly stable. Most of the farms that we work with are growing anywhere from 25 to 100 acres. And we have about 5 producers that we work with. Most of them are in New York and Connecticut, the Connecticut River Valley. Occasionally, we will source some spring barley from Maine if we're not able to get enough from our region. But that's really only happened in years where we have expanded and we needed more barley. But as I mentioned, the last couple of years, things have really stabilized. So everything is just kind of humming along in a nice, stable way.
Very interesting. And could you tell us a bit about the criteria you look for when you choose producers?
Infrastructure is a very important part of the criteria. And having experience in growing a cereal or corn or soy, some sort of crop that requires some quality specification. One of the growers that you'll meet in our next part of this webinar, Spencer Thrall, he is actually a tobacco farmer. And he grows about 500 acres of cereal grains. And he also has his own malt house. The reason why he's a good grower is because he's invested in a lot of the infrastructure. So everything from a grain drill to a combine to a dryer and grain storage and cleaners. And he also had the experience of growing tobacco, which has a lot of, specifications. So he was able to understand what it requires to meet those specifications for a buyer. And a lot of times, yeah, it's a phone call, and it's sort of like asking a grower what kind of equipment they have, what they plan to do with harvesting. The harvesting and the post-harvesting is really a very critical point in growing malting barley. So just making sure that they have the ability to take the barley off the field at a higher moisture and understand what it would take to dry that down properly to preserve the germination, and then potentially store it for, most of the growers we work with have storage up until the corn or soy gets harvested, and then they need to move that off the farm, which we've been able to accommodate for that. We have about a million and a quarter pounds of storage at our malt house. So we're able to take things once they've been harvested, dried, tested, and then we can take them. And the big parts of quality really is number one, that it's a malting variety, and that the seeds are plump enough that their test weight is proper, so that they're the right size to be able to be malted and go through the brewer's mill. So the plumpness is important. Germination is extremely important. If the grain is not able to germinate at least 95%, it would not be suitable for us. And usually you have issues with germination if you are drying the grain and you use too high of a heat. And then sometimes if you don't harvest in a timely manner, you will also have issues with germination because you have potentially allowed that grain to sprout in the field. The protein content is important, but a lot of the varieties that are being grown, and winter barley in particular, does not tend to have very high protein. It tends to have lower protein and tends to be more consistent year to year to have very similar protein. Those are really the big factors in quality. And we have in 2015, the state of New York funded a malt quality lab at Hartwick College in New York. And so they're able to do all of the grain testing and the malt testing, and as well now they do flour testing. So that's been a really important resource. A really critical part of the infrastructure is to have accessible testing.
Okay, thank you. Any criteria you may have on the practices in the field themselves? Are there any criteria related to?
Yes, but the biggest one is just not using glyphosate. But most of the growers that we work with wouldn't use glyphosate. We are both certified organic, and we also process conventional grains. but we also have in our contracts that storage insecticides, to if you need to use that needs to be communicated to us. But most of the farms the producers that we work with are using very sustainable practices. Most of them are using manure for fertilization, some sort of chicken litter or, that sort of thing. So, yeah, we don't really tell the producers how to produce the grain. We just more focus on the quality.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. The guide you were referring to, is it the Craft Masters Guild Quality and Safety Manual?
Yes.
Yes, okay. So we may share the link in the chat. There's a question in the chat. We'll be talking about winter versus spring barley in a few minutes. So I will keep this question for this block, if it's okay with you, Sébastien. We'll be going through this topic in a few minutes. I want now to go to talking about customers and the value your malts create, Andrea. Which customer segments are you primarily focusing on right now, and why? Is it microbreweries, distilleries?
Yeah, so for us, we have found the most success working with small to medium sized breweries and distilleries, and bakeries. So there is a lot of malt that is used in baking. So we will make our malt and then we will mill it in our mill and sell that to bakeries, some of them large bakeries. But the typical brewer that we work with or distiller that we work with really identify as farm brewers or farm distillers. And they're part of, I would say, the umbrella of agrotourism, which I know is really a rich part of Quebec as well, where people are going to these breweries, and they are bringing their families. They're hold on just one second. I'm just going to move my dog. I'm sorry. Okay, I'm sorry about that.
No problem.
And so a lot of these breweries are actually on farms or are maybe not currently operating farms, but previous dairy farms or barns in the back of people's property. And they are, that is part of why people come and come to their breweries, is they're looking for that sort of agro-tourism experience. And a lot of these craft brewers are focused on, really differentiating themselves through their use of local ingredients, and, making it known that they are using local ingredients, and that is almost like a winery, maybe not going as far to express terroir in like very specific ways, but more in the value side of what it's like to be part of a region and to be proud of what that region can produce, and to be proud of your skill set in that you are able to take what's grown in your region and grow something really special from it. So I would say that that's the mindset of a lot of the breweries that we work with. And it's a lot of direct communication. So that the type of businesses that we sell malt to, the owners are the brewers, or they're very close, that it's not a corporation. It's a lot of family run businesses that are, they might have a staff of, a few to maybe 20 people or something. So, and these places are really popular. These are breweries that tend to have, a following, and are part of, an agro-tourism experience for people. So so that means that a lot of the malt that we sell, we're not selling silos, although we do sell bulk. We do silo fills for a couple of customers, but for the most part, these brewers and distillers are purchasing malt either in the super sacks or in 50-pound bags. And some of them are very small. Some of them are operating where it's just two people running the brewery, and they might be purchasing, maybe 2,000 pounds of malt a month. So not huge size customers.
Okay. And oh, sorry, you were about to add something.
I was just going to say they do charge a premium for their beer. So we are kind of talking about premium beer products.
Okay. And how do you communicate the added value of your grains, and which messages seem to resonate the most with your customers?
Mm-hmm. Something we started in 2019 was a program called the Square Foot campaign, where we are communicating that every can of beer that's made with local malt supports 4 square feet of local farm land. And we carry that through to all of our products. So when a customer of ours gets a pallet of malt, which tends to be about 1 ton, 2,000 pounds, they get a card on that says this order supported an acre of farmland. So we're communicating the direct impact of agriculture, how you're supporting agriculture through your purchases. And then we have marketing materials that those breweries can then put up at their, we have banners. So once they hit 10 pallets, they get a banner that says a champion of Northeast Farms, and it says 10 acres. And then we have 50, 100, 250. So there's kind of like a little bit of an incentive, I guess, to keep going. And another way that we communicate the value is through sensory. So actually tasting our malt versus other malts that they might be thinking or previously had bought from Europe or thinking of buying. So we do events where we invite the brewers and their staff to come, and we put together these hot steeps and we taste the malts together. We even allow them to kind of influence potentially how we will continue to create those malts. And then every year we take our staff and invite any of our customers that want to on a tour of the farms that of the producers that we work with. And that's a really fun 2-day event where you can meet the farms, you can take photos in the fields, you can cut barley and bring it back to your tap room. So that has also become part of how we communicate the value to our customers. And then obviously just through social media, just trying to support one another as much as possible, and call out those breweries that are really supportive of local.
Great, thank you. We're gonna take there's 2 questions, and well, the issues about barley, winter versus spring, as I said, the next block is about it. So we're just gonna wait at the end of this block to answer the question. But there's a question from Jean-François. What is the share of organic versus conventional of the business?
I would say it's probably this year about 25% organic and 75% conventional. And that's just for the malt. We also added, we do distillery grains. So they are not required to be malted, but we do a lot of distilleries need them to be hammer milled. So we have a hammer mill and we hammer mill a lot of corn and rye for distilleries that are making bourbon or corn whiskey. And in that case, because of the lower price point and because of the availability, we're able to do primarily organic with those grains.
Okay, thank you. And there's a question about, do you have some customer needs about regen practices, KPIs on the supply with your farmer relationship?
I would say that is starting with certain corporations like Whole Foods kind of pushing. Like I was just on the phone the other day with a customer who was having to fill out a Whole Foods survey about regenerative practices. That was very detailed. I was surprised at how much information Whole Foods was asking this brewery about the regenerative practices of the farm. But I was, able to help them answer a lot of it. But I think there is more awareness about regenerative farming. And I think what we need to remember in that is that cereal grains, and specifically winter cereal grains, are a critical component of being able to steward land regeneratively. And so the fact that we can provide a market for producers to be able to potentially profit off of a cover crop is a really positive thing. We're also 2 years ago, we became regenerative organic certified. And that is, there is a difference between regenerative and regenerative organic. And that's probably, I don't know if that's part of the topic today. So we won't have, we don't have to get into it, but yeah, there is certainly a lot of corporate communication nowadays about regenerative.
Thank you so much. Now let's dive into quality management and variety selection. We're going to talk about a bit about winter, more in-depth winter barley. So how do you manage variability from one harvest to the other?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, year to year, the consistency of the winter barley that we're working with is pretty positive. We don't usually have a lot of fluctuations in quality year to year with winter barley. And that's just been our experience. I'm not sure if that's, going to be everybody's experience, but we, early on saw a lot more variability with spring barley and a lot of failure with spring barley, where we saw a lot of success with winter barley. Nadine, could you repeat the question too? I feel like I'm not quite answering this.
Well, no, that's okay. The variability from one harvest to the other, how do you manage and compose?
So usually what we try to do is manage our supply so that we are not having to malt the previous year's barley until at least January. So making sure that we have enough supply to do that. And that gives us time to be able to work with the processes that we've put into play, which is, the crop gets harvested. Usually winter barley gets harvested the last week of June or the first week of July. And then it might take the farm, depending on what other activities they have going on, it might take them a couple of weeks to get the sample to the lab or to us to be able to send to the lab to have it tested. And then it would take another 10 days to have that lab work back to understand the grain quality specifications. So that grain quality test would give us moisture of the grain, protein content, the test weight, the plumpness, the germination. And with the germination, it gives you the germinative capacity. So that's, can this grain germinate? But then there's also germinative energy. And there's a 4 mil and an 8 mil. And that usually will give you an idea of whether you're going to have water sensitive barley or whether you're going to have dormancy. And that's one of the reasons why we try to wait until January, is because a lot of winter barley in the Northeast, the varieties that we've selected that are more adapted to our environment, which is wet, tend to have dormancy. And you want that because you don't want it to sprout in the field. You want it to sprout in the malt bin. So, that usually around August, we have most of the testing back. And then we can start taking in, then we have some small samples that we can start malting and do micro malting with. And, we can flag any kind of potential issues, and we have time. So time is on our side to be able to think about, okay, which customers are we going to be able to use this barley for, and kind of plan things out. And I would say part of our process in managing year to year variation is engaging our customers in this process. Some of them are very interested in it and others really aren't. But the idea that there is transparency in when we're switching from one year to another and communicating, we usually do a crop report every year that we send to our customers. And this crop report is it's a communication. It's, this is our these are our producers. This is how much they grew. These are some of the other crops that they're growing. This is the protein content. This is what we think we're going to use this barley for. Because depending on quality, there may be reasons why we would use a lower protein barley for a Pilsner instead of, another type of. So in that time period, giving ourselves that time, I think we have been able to manage year to year variation. Occasionally we will blend, but generally it's complicated for us to be able to blend from a infrastructure standpoint. So usually we're trying to do single field, single variety.
Okay, and can you talk to us a bit more about the varieties themselves? Like, what are the ones that show the most consistency for brewing quality, whether it be, you can say, with spring or winter?
Yeah. Where we've landed over the last several years is we had one variety that we really liked. It was called Endeavor, and it was a USDA 2-row winter that had generally winter barleys tend to have lower enzyme activity, and those enzymes are important for converting long chain sugars into short chain and then converting those sugars into starches into sugars. And so winter barley does tend to have a lower enzyme package than say like Synergy or Newdale or Connect. And so, and that's good because craft brewers have actually, in a white paper that the Brewers Association put out in 2014, they were saying to the malt industry, your malt has, the North American two-row malt has too much enzymes in it. It's too active. We would like more like the European style of malts that have less enzymes in them. So luckily, we're kind of positioned in that place where those are the kinds of barley that we are growing. So where we've settled is we malt a lot of Violetta, which is a two-row winter variety that was bred by Ackermann in Germany. And that has a lot of dormancy in it, and it takes an extra 2 days to germinate. But in that time period, what you gain, even though you're obviously time is money when you're manufacturing things and you have equipment being used that can't, but you have the ability with that time to really be able to encourage the enzymes that you want and eventually the flavors that you want in the end. When you're kilning a really high enzyme malt, if you add just a little bit extra temperature, you'll get a lot of color and flavor that you might not want. And so you're able to turn the dial a lot slower with winter barley that has lower enzymes. So the Endeavor was a really interesting winter barley that it was winter barley that had low protein, but also had a higher enzyme package. And it had really, really amazing flavor. However, most of the growers that we work with had to stop using it because it was very prone to pre-harvest sprouting. And that could be disastrous, especially with Endeavor. Some varieties of barley can have pre-harvest sprout and you can still malt them. Endeavor wouldn't do that. So that could be a total loss for a farm. And so a total loss like that only needs to happen once for a farm to say, I don't want to grow this variety anymore. So we only have one grower that grows Endeavor for us, and we have one customer that requests that Endeavor. So that's kind of how we do that. So for the most part, we're malting Violetta and Lightning, which is another two-row winter barley. And now we've started to play around with Avalon. So that's kind of an exciting new development out of Virginia Tech. There's a young barley breeder down there, kind of new energy going into that breeding program. But yeah, we've been through a lot of other varieties. We've tried, malting Odyssey and Calypso, and Wint Malt was an early one that we were told would be good agronomically in the Northeast, but it was just complicated to be able to malt it. So.
Okay, thank you so much. I will ask the question that Sebastian asked a bit earlier on about the question is, what is your quality issues you get on winter barley versus spring barley?
The quality issues with winter barley is that dormancy and potentially, water sensitivity and also the amount of time that it takes to be able to germinate. So if you're at capacity with your equipment, it's a little hard, and you're busy, it's a little hard to say, okay, we're going to let every batch germinate an extra 2 days. That ends up being a lot less batches that you can malt in a year. But honestly, that's really one of the biggest. The spring barley, the issues that we see on that is depending on when the producer is able to plant it and harvest it. We could see high protein. We could see thin kernels. And we see a lot of pre-harvest sprouting because a lot of the spring barleys that are out there have been developed for more arid, dry regions and not for wet regions. And so with the spring barley, I mean, I can't even, more so than not, we will have situations where somebody grows Newdale, Connect, Synergy. They think that, the barley is just ready to be harvested. It's starting to dry down. It's, you don't even have a weather event. You don't even have like a day of rain. You could just have dew in the morning, or, you couldn't even point to an event and say that's how the pre-harvest sprout, like that's where it came from. And yet you see pre-harvest sprout. So I would say that's been our biggest challenge with spring barley, is not feeling like we can control through early harvesting or harvesting at a high moisture to be able to get that barley to be sound, which is not having pre-harvest sprout. And then again, the fluctuations in protein and kernel size. And that really probably is happening because the plant is under some sort of stress, whether it's, I mean, we've just seen so many severe, we've been from severe rain to severe drought. It's like, year to year, our growing seasons have really fluctuated. And the spring barley is only in the ground for maybe 90 days, 100 days. And so some of that time that it's in the ground it could be under a lot of stress depending on what's going on. Whereas the winter barley, it establishes and it's in the ground a lot longer. And I think potentially that's partly why we see more consistency. Just maybe that's more adaptive. But I would say those are the two biggest. And then, just that time of year, sometimes when, just that the few weeks of difference between winter barley and spring barley being harvested, we always tend to see more like mold and, sort of like the spring barley tends to not be as bright and clean as the winter barley.
Okay. Thank you so much for the answer. Another question. Do you require the farmer to have certified seeds, or can the farmer replant its seeds?
We don't require that the farmer use certified seed. Barley is a mostly self-pollinating cereal grain. Some of the other cereal grains that we purchase, like rye, is more of an open pollinated. And so we do require that to be at least every 3 years to use clean seed. And that just benefits everybody because you just end up with better quality by using clean seed. But for the barley, no, it doesn't really make sense. Most of the farms that we work with have the ability on the farm to clean and treat seed to be able to use it year to year.
Okay. And another question is, here we sometimes have problems with vomitoxins.
Mm-hmm.
Is something you experience too?
It was something that when we first started, it was told to us that would be our biggest issue, or one of our biggest issues. Again, with the winter barley, we really haven't seen as much dawn. This year was the first year where we had farms that had a lot of issues with dawn. But we normally see below 1 ppm and even like below 0.5 ppm or undetectable in most of the grains that we have tested. And I think that's partly because early on there was a lot of education around rotation and making sure that you're never planting barley into corn stubble, or and then also the use of fungicides as needed, and also treating seed prior to planting it if it's conventional.
Okay, thank you. Uh, when we were talking on in preparation of this webinar, Andrea, you talked to me a bit about in Europe the choice of varieties. Can you just touch a few words about this in like high level?
Yeah, I mean, what we were able to what we were able to do early on was, rather than try to develop winter barleys for the Northeast, we thought that in order to accelerate the availability, the testing and the availability of regionally adapted barley, that we would look to Europe to see what varieties and look to the breeders in Europe. And mostly in Europe, the breeders are private entities like Ackerman that I mentioned earlier, or Lima Grain. And a lot of these breeding companies were very engaged with us in 2014, 15, 16, basically before COVID, and would come to our conferences and come to our events and bring seed over for variety, participate in variety trials, participate in some of the pilot scale and production scale testing that was done. And so, and again, this was during the kind of craft beer bubble that happened. So there was a lot of engagement there. And so again, like a lot of the varieties that people are using are the Ackerman, Lima Grain. So there's Violetta, there's Flavia, there's Odyssey, Calypso, and yeah, there's definitely some interest, especially in Europe with malting barley now. There's another quality factor that I didn't mention earlier, but the reason why I didn't mention it is because it's not something that we have a lot of control over right now, but there's a I'm not going to be able to say the chemical name of it, but there's a GN is something that's found in barley and gets concentrated even higher when you malt it. And there are parts of Europe that are looking to ban GN because it's considered a carcinogen if you make alcohol in copper. There's like some sort of reaction that happens. So a lot of distilleries are looking ahead and starting to ask for GN-free varieties of barley. But there's only a few out there and they're proprietary. So it's a little bit of this, like we are looking for no GN or low GN varieties of winter barley. Odyssey is one of them from Lima Grain, but they still don't really exist. But that is something that hopefully we'll look to our European breeders to help with bringing some varieties in. But those aren't really readily available right now.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And let's now look a bit ahead and take a look at the future of the industry. What are the biggest remaining obstacles for a craft maltster in your region, and how are you addressing these obstacles?
Mm. One of the things that we're seeing right now because of the decline in craft brewing is a lot of the breweries had contracts with larger maltsters. That was sort of the industry standard, was that because there was scarcity for a long time, because the industry was growing, if you wanted to secure your German Pilsner malt or your Czech Pilsner malt or your British pale malt, you would be contracting that potentially 5 years out. And so a lot of those brewers, if you had that contract in 2019, let's say, or 2020, you were projecting like double-digit growth at that point, because nobody was saying that there was going to be a flattening of the industry. And so a lot of those breweries are still under those contracts, even though they're producing less beer. And so that makes it hard for those breweries to be able to purchase malt from a craft malt house, because it's just a financial decision. Like they have to pay their they have to honor their contracts, and so they can't always buy extra. So we're definitely in a place where we see the challenges of that our customers are under. The way that we see an opportunity for this is that it's a long-term opportunity to really fortify the relationships and really focus on flavor and quality and kind of producing something that nobody else can produce. And so that's kind of the opportunity that we see for ourselves right now is, like, for instance, the regenerative organic, being able to produce a malt that has that designation for the breweries that are interested in that. We've worked a lot on developing recipes for historic malts and for, again, looking at malts that are like a British pale, but are made from a local malt house. So there are a lot of challenges still within the overall health of the industry and how the industry kind of rebounds from this temporary, maybe not shrinking that's happening. And I mean, one of the things that as a malt house we're continuing to look at is the food side of things as well, just to be able to diversify a little bit more and produce more malt for bakeries and that sort of thing. And given that we have a flour mill, being able to make like malted flours that are self-rising and that sort of thing. But it really, at this point, I think there still are a lot of opportunities to find those relationships with breweries that want to use local ingredients and really want to, look at kind of like that winery model of, terroir and, kind of being proud of what is being grown and produced locally.
Great. And do you have any hints about how can we better secure supply and reduce quality-related risk? Um, uh, could it be like agreements, contracts, shared testing, any types of agronomy support?
I think the agronomy support, if the producers are already tapped into that, then I think the agronomy support is really critical and important. Just understanding, what kind of amendments that might be able to make the plant more winter hardy. Just those types of things could go a long way in helping this to succeed. And really understanding those attributes of winter barley, but not just like taking my word for it, but like really digging in and exploring, doing the sensory and really kind of evaluating it for yourselves. And that takes a lot of work and dedication and focus. Doing these sensory trials where you're micro malting and you're doing sensory, and it takes time, and it takes time over years. You have to train people on being able to do the sensory. It's not that hard, but it can be intimidating, but it also really can help you explore, again, the opportunities of these like beautiful clean malts that you can make from winter barley.
Mm-hmm.
But I would say the collaboration piece and really trying to engage people that are passionate together, that always seems to be, for me, where I was a social worker before I became a maltster. So I really think about things from more of a systems point of view, than just from like a single business point of view.
Very interesting. Would you like to, I know you had prepared some slides. Are there any that could be relevant at this point to before
Sure.
we wrap up and go to a question period. You'd like to walk us through
Sure.
your slides?
And I will just answer the one question about glyphosate.
Yeah.
So that would just be glyphosate as a desiccant. So farms that we work with are still using glyphosate, especially if they're conventional regenerative. A lot of times glyphosate will be used to kill a cover crop and be able to no-till into it and that sort of thing. So it's more on the idea of using glyphosate as a desiccant. Okay, we'll share my screen. Saying that my screen sharing is paused. I'm going to try again. Is that sharing?
No, we don't see. We see your screen, but it seems to be black only. Do you have
So
any
strange.
idea, Shumaila, who's our tech expert? Anything?
Yeah, that's strange because it was just working.
Or do you want to share us? Maybe send send me the. Is it a PowerPoint or
It's
is
it's
it
a Google slide. Let me try again.
Oh,
Now it's working?
we see your screen. We see your
Okay,
desk.
good. That's good. Now let me just get over to that Google slide. Yeah, that was weird.
Excellent.
Okay. So these are just a few pictures of the early days of our facility. We had an old potato and onion processing barn that we converted into our first malt house. And then over time, we built an extension on that building. And now in 2020 to 2022, we renovated a paper mill. And we have about 40,000 square feet of production space now. Does this show up okay for everybody?
The left portion is a bit cut, but we're able to see the rest.
Maybe I'll just do it like this then. But this is just an example of some of the communication that we do about supporting local. So we show people, a typical 6-pack of beer made from conventional commodity malt is only the farmer's share is 4 cents per 6-pack. Whereas if you're purchasing your malt through Valley Malt, it's 10 times more, the farmer's share. And so these are the banners over there in the lower right-hand corner that our customers get when they purchase many pallets of malt from us. That card up in the upper right-hand corner shows, communicates when somebody orders. So that 1/4 of an acre would have been a 500-pound, 10 bags of malt, basically. And when you go to a lot of the breweries that we work with, you'll see that they're very proud of these. They put them up on the wall. If they don't get one of them, they say, "Hey, we didn't get one of our cards with our, our acres card with our order." So a lot of people feel very proud about their support. This was just something I thought I would put up for everyone to see. Like in the state of New York, These are production records from 2023 or 2024. But New York craft brewers, this is just the craft brewers. This isn't the larger adjunct brewers or anything. Their demand is right around 94 million pounds of malt annually. So that would be right around 31,000 acres of malt barley, which would not be hard for New York to grow. So that's just to give people a little bit of a sense of what the market, how the size of the market and how that relates to acres. And I just want to remind everybody that malt is considered the soul of beer. So malt will provide color, flavor, mouthfeel, and aroma. So a lot of what you're getting from a beer comes from the malt. Although a lot of people talk about the hops, the malt is a very important ingredient. And one of the things that we pointed to as our North Star when we really started to understand the industry of malt was Maris Otter was this malt that everybody talked about. They would import it in from England. And it's like considered like one of the best malts in the world. And the story of Maris Otter is that in the late 1800s, when this was developed by Edward Bevans, the malt barley industry in Britain was at an all-time low. They were importing 6-row barley from California. They weren't even really independently producing most of their malt. And this researcher and farmer, Edward Bevans, he wanted to change that. His goal was to bring back the importance of malt production in Britain to Britain. And he knew that the way he had to do that was by developing and finding the right variety. And that ended up being Maris Otter. And that was, over 100 years ago. And it's still considered, even with all the ability to GMO and CRISPR and all this breeding technology. I mean, we have we've been able to take barley and completely understand all of the genetics of it. And yet this is still considered one of the best malts in the world. So I think what it really takes is the right people with the right amount of passion, with the right goal. And so to me, I always thought in the Northeast, our North Star is we're going to have our own Maris Otter someday. It might take 50 years, but with, coordination and the right people and the right mentality, that this is something that we can do anywhere, especially in our region. And I just wanted to show you all. So this was funded through the Brewers Association, which is the trade association for craft brewers in the US, or actually, I think it's in all of North America. But they were able to fund both a spring barley nursery, coordinated trials, as well as winter. So this is kind of what it looked like. And these were all the different sites. And this took place for about 6 years that these coordinated trials were funded. And they, we had a lot of input from brewers and from maltsters of which varieties to put into the trials. And again, a lot of those for the winter barley came from Europe. And from that, there was, again, this white paper that I talked about, which I'm happy to share a link for that. But that was a really important paper that came out in 2014, where the Brewers Association said craft brewers need malt that has more flavor, that a lot of the malting barley varieties, which is mostly Metcalfe and Copeland, that were being grown, really didn't have flavor, or like the flavor profile that craft brewers want, which is why a lot of craft brewers bring their malt from Europe. And part of that has to do with the legacy of brewing in the United States, in that a lot of the beer that is popular is adjunct beer that is kind of very light. And we did a comparison to some of the Northeast winter barleys with some of the European malts. Because again, this was our focus, was trying to see if we could kind of get to that level of quality. And this is just a picture of us. These are the field tours that we do every year with our customers and our staff, and we go visit the farms. And it's just really helped to establish some really wonderful relationships. You know, when you take the time to go visit a farm, you see everything that's going on at the farm, and you can really have an appreciation for how their businesses are doing and how they're growing and what's important for them that year, and how that can change year to year, depending. You know, we're seeing now farms that we've worked with for 15 years transitioning, where the farmer is getting older and they're transitioning the farm to some of their staff. And so we're watching all of those, you know, being a part of all of those things happening. So I think, you know, again, so much comes down to relationships and communicating and having a common goal. So that's, I guess, where I would finish this presentation. I'll stop sharing. Okay.
Great. Thank you so much, Andrea. It was very, very interesting, very inspiring session. Now we have a few minutes for final questions from the participants. I will write a question for participants in the chat. La question pour les participants, est-ce que ce webinaire-là vous invite à tester quelque chose la prochaine saison au Québec? Que ce soit en termes de technique, de variété.
Puis, en attendant, sachez que nous vous partagerons l'enregistrement du webinaire avec les documents, la présentation de Andrea aussi. On va attendre de voir s'il y a des questions finales. Allez-y dans le chat. Juste, Jean-François, une question. Andrea, there's a question for you. How do you fix the price of the barley you buy?
I would say that the price of barley right now is around $9 to $11 a bushel, depending on the quality. But sometimes when we're working with new producers and we know that their risk is a little bit higher in growing a new crop, we can pay, you know, maybe closer to $12 a bushel. And new varieties as well. So if it's something that's kind of a trial and the farmer is taking a risk by growing a new variety, we'll pay more for that as well.
Thank you. You have a question, you are reading it.
Great question. Great question. Yes, I would say that Oregon, in their breeding program, Pat Hayes had very early on was really engaged with the craft malt cohort that we were creating. Because he's also kind of like a crazy guy. And he was like, you guys are all crazy. What are you doing? You know? And yes, I would say that a lot of the varieties that were being bred in Oregon were really had in mind some of the growing conditions of the Northeast. And also had in mind trying to develop varieties for flavor. I'm trying to think, you know, we didn't grow any full pint. I'm trying to think what of, well, Lightning is kind of an OSU variety. I think it's a collaborative variety between OSU and somewhere else. But that variety has done pretty well. It's been good. We're happy with it. Again, it also takes a little bit longer germination to get the enzymes where you want them, but.
Thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to share your passion with us this morning. Oh, Are you seeing the same interest and pride in demonstrating the acres of local production from malt in the flowers you're producing?
Yes, in fact, I would just say that we are seeing a lot of growth. We're very happy that we diversified and added a flour mill to our business, because that is where we're seeing a lot of growth. We're seeing that after COVID and everybody learning how to, not everybody, but a lot of people learning how to make sourdough because everybody was at home. There's this bubble going on now with artisanal baking and micro bakeries and a real understanding of ingredients and people wanting flour that is stone milled or heirloom or fresh. And now you have this other piece of it, which is health, and people understanding sort of that a lot of commercial flour is void of dietary fiber and can be enriched with things, but you could also just keep the grain whole and process it less and still have a lot of flavor and nutrition and functionality. So you all have La Milanese in your area, and we look at that again and we say, if they did that, we're 30 years behind, but we can do it too. So that's it is a very exciting part of our business right now. I still love barley. Barley's my favorite malt, but the flour is pretty exciting as well because there's a lot of energy there right now.
Thank you. En attendant de voir s'il y a d'autres questions, juste vous rappeler que le 8 décembre, on va recevoir par Zoom un producteur partenaire de Valley Malt. Donc, on va rentrer plus dans les réalités terrain de la production. I was saying that we'll have one of your producers on the next webinar. So we'll be more on the field. Est-ce qu'il y a des questions? Sinon, on va vous laisser aller. Je vais vous... Oh, une petite dernière de Jean-François.
Instead of typing, can I just see it?
Go ahead.
All right. You've mentioned that the farms have to have some cleaning facilities. I was wondering to get a little more insight on that, like how much, what are the ratios you expect to remove from the grain? Like on 1 ton, are you removing like 20% of small grain? And that would give us an insight on the price you're paying, because $11 per bushel sounds like a good price. Was that a conventional price or was that a organic price?
That was a conventional price.
All right, so that sounds like the price of near soybean, or so this is pretty good compared to wheat, per se. Now, if that is a clean grain, there's some effort that have to be done on the farm. Therefore, we might have to remove some of that. So how much of the grain has to be cut off to reach a level you like to buy?
So we don't require that all of the farms that we work with have cleaning on farm. We did build that infrastructure into our facility so that we have the ability to clean, although we can't clean like rye out of your barley if you have rye in there. We don't have an optical sorter, but we do have the ability to clean. So some of the farms we work with, we're really just requiring them to put it through a rotary cleaner so that when we get, because like not every producer understands what, this is part of the education, is like showing them what clean grain looks like and how we expect it. Because sometimes they're not even blowing out like chaff and fully threshing. And so then if we get barley in like that, it can really clog up our system. So at a very minimum, we're asking farms to have a rotary cleaner, and being able to put that through, or if they have a dryer, having some sort of, if it's a batch dryer, having some sort of cleaning capacity there. But what I was mentioning earlier, just about like if the barley isn't as plump, if it's like 50% plump and we're going to try to use it, I would prefer that 50% to get cleaned off in New York rather than having it brought here. So what we'll do is we know the farms that we work with that do have cleaning, and then we can have that grain sent there and have it cleaned. But generally, like the $9 a bushel is, it's not like cleaned, like sized and cleaned, but it's fairly clean. But that is coming to us, not put through like a separator or anything like that.
All right. Well, thank you for the clarifications. Much appreciated.
Yeah.
On arrive à la fin du temps. Donc, il n'y a pas d'autres questions. Donc, merci tout le monde d'avoir été présent. On va se retrouver le 8 décembre. Thank you so much, Andrea, again, for your time.